This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. We're at the 2019 UIC Medical Cannabis Symposium in Tweed Heads, and we're speaking with Diana Walter, Regional Advocate from South Australia.
That's right, Andrew. Yes.
Tell us about your work.
Yeah, well, it is exactly as you've described. I advocate for patients wanting to access medicinal cannabis. And when I say patients, it's really health consumers.
So we've spoken to some powerful speakers today with some powerful topics. Very often they're either at the government level or the medical level, and the patient is sandwiched in between there, being frustrated with access. So tell us about the real stories about patient access, what you've come up against.
And the compelling stories we've heard over the last 3 days are even from our speakers and their personal stories. So when people come to me in wanting support or advice about how they can get through to their MPs, their doctors, I always say that a personal narrative is such a powerful tool. We heard from Justin Sinclair, whose partner has been touched by endometriosis. Your former speaker, her father with prostate cancer. That was my father as well.
Yeah.
So many powerful stories. And what I have seen, and we've seen it especially in Dan's case, when Dan met with Mike Baird, the former Premier of New South Wales, and he connected with Dan, it became personal, it became real. It just wasn't a number on a sheet or a name that he could not relate to. So my advice to any health consumer is to tell your story and do it in a way that is compelling and really powerful. Don't just sit at home on your keyboard and tap out a message on Facebook. Look at who your MP is. Get involved and engaged in democracy.
Yeah.
Really important.
I think it's a real interesting thing that so many people of Australia, they feel disconnected to politics, and they're even scared, intimidated by their local MP, without realising that their MP, that they're a constituent for their MP, and that they actually have not just pulling power, but the MP, most of them actually do have some caring notion, but they don't know if they don't know.
That's so true, and you've just hit on a really important point, that people are unsure on how to access their MPs. I live in regional South Australia, so it's even more challenging.
Yeah.
The MP may not be living in the local community. They might be 500 or 600 kilometres away, or indeed in the federal electorate that I live in, it is 93% of the state of South Australia. It is massive. So, and the MP has 2 offices. So connecting and knowing how to engage with members of Parliament, taking aside the fact that someone may be really quite challenged by that, is half the battle.
What do you say though about the watering down effect? You reach out to a local MP, then they have to impress upon the regional or state level, and then it goes from the state to the national level. Do you find that message gets watered down? Should we be actually targeting the federal politicians and
Absolutely, and it can get watered down, especially if you live in a seat that might be serviced by an independent MP or someone that's in opposition and not necessarily someone that has the voice of the government. But that is also powerful, especially federally, leading up to our 2019 federal election. Don't just lobby the current MP in your federal seat, lobby the senators, lobby the wannabe senators, lobby the wannabe candidates, and understand who those candidates are. The Electoral Commission of Australia has an amazing resource, so here's some hints and tips for people that might view this. Get online if you like and look at who those candidates are and put some really strong questions to them. And then when you do your research and work out what their stance is on medical cannabis, you might want to publish that yourself and say, this is what I've learned in my electorate. I did that for a local election a few years ago, and I published quite a detailed response to a range of questions that I had, and that just didn't influence how I voted. It influenced how other people may have cast their vote as well.
So how much time would the average punter need to invest in meeting with their local MP, the local member of Parliament, and also the lobbying? Like if obviously it's going to be strongest because of a heartfelt need, if there's a real burning desire because of a real issue with them. There are those of us, me for instance, who right now I haven't got anybody in my immediate arena affected by anything that requires the access to medicinal cannabis, so it would be more on a compassionate ground.
Absolutely.
How much time do you think that involves?
For me, the last 10 years, maybe longer, maybe longer.
Yeah.
But for anyone just on the in the community that would like to make an appointment, it takes a minute to pick up the phone or to send an email. But before you go in, be prepared and ask for a set amount of time. Don't just be offered half an hour.
Yeah.
If you think you're going to need an hour, dedicate the first 20 minutes to introduction and some background. Launch into some facts and some really good data, do some preparation, and then go away or maybe conclude that interview or that meeting, if you like, with what you want to take out of that. So you could say to your MP, this is what I'd like to see you do for me. What's your commitment? And get some sort of understanding. And the really important thing for me, and I'd have to say I should have a crown, the follow-up queen.
Right.
So follow up.
Right.
Absolutely, because you'll sit down and have a conversation and remember that for every MP, they usually have at a state level in my state about 25,000 constituents. And I'm just one person that they may have seen in that day, and they're dealing with parliamentary business. So follow up, make it personal, put a note in your diary. Everyone's got their phones handy. Set an alarm for a month's time and send another email if you haven't heard anything.
Tell them
really
that you're
simple.
not going away.
Absolutely, yeah.
What about the power of groups? A lot of people afflicted by chronic disease, whether it be cancer, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, whatever.
Look at
they have their support groups.
Yeah.
What about the power of numbers going as a group to their MP?
What we heard yesterday from the New South Wales Nurses and Midwives Federation, the most incredibly powerful lobby, and I think David Caldecott really summed it up. As a doctor, he's frightened of nurses, and so should MPs be. Without our nurses, we don't have the level of health care that we need. They're very influential. United in Compassion, another exceptional lobby group, very strong voice. But don't be fooled, it's not often, or not always, those really big voices and collectives that are often heard. Sometimes it's the quietly spoken voices that will actually get the messages through. So my recommendation is, if you've got a story to tell, a personal story, bundle it up into a really nice narrative and sit down and have those conversations.
Patient advocacy doesn't only involve politicians but also medical professionals.
Yes.
And sometimes that can be a real brick wall because their medical professions are sometimes, very often, scared of being stigmatised themselves.
Yeah, education. It's a bit of a mantra on its own. Common theme throughout the last 3 days.
You say mantra, I say brick wall. It's more
it is. and one of the presenters had a slide, the young man from Israel, with his beating his head up against a brick wall, and that was in the research community. So education is so important, and in terms of doctors, Justin Sinclair summed it up beautifully. They're at a point now in their careers where they're being challenged by patients that may have more knowledge than they do.
Yeah.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
Absolutely embrace it. And Dr. Abrams, he used that language, and I would encourage our doctors and allied health professionals to do the same.
And some are embracing it, but too often we see those that don't or won't. How do you break down those doors? How do you break down the walls, the barriers?
In my experience, you pick your battles. You cannot win all the battles. And I had a recent experience with a neurologist, and I questioned him for my own benefit about accessing medicinal cannabis legally. And he said, oh no, there's no way that I could do that because I'll have people lined up out my door, and I don't want that. And I couldn't get through to him, and I said, where does your knowledge come from? Where are your learnings? And he pointed to his bookcase with leather-bound books, and I grabbed one and I flicked through it to the first and second page, and it was a book for his that he references every day that was last printed in 1970. And I shut that and I said, hey.
So, again, it's remaining current, and people will have old texts, things like that, but, this refusal, the relying on the bastion of authority, of status, without this compassion. I mean, to me, it's compassion.
It is.
I don't. You say pick your battles, but I wonder if, because of this groundswell, because of the need and because of indeed it's already being used illicitly. So all that they're doing is forcing illicit drug use. That's all that they're doing because
Yeah.
people will use it.
Yeah.
I wonder if, because of the lobbying of UIC and others, that this will be the biggest I told you so
Without
in
a
Australian
doubt,
medical
without
history.
without a doubt, and we just need to be very mindful that when we walk into the rooms of our politicians or those that have been cast aside at a poll, or to our doctors and our health professionals, that when we say "I told you so," that we do it with respect.
Wise words. Diana Walter, thank you so much for
It's a
joining us
pleasure.
on FX Medicine today.
Pleasure.
This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook.